Good afternoon, good afternoon. You can all take your seat again. I see a lot of exciting voices and faces. Good afternoon, soyez le bienvenue. Welcome everyone. Take your seats, settle in, because we have an exciting program ahead of us. Perfect, perfect, perfect. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm super happy to see you all here. Welcome. Also for the people online joining us, a very warm welcome. It doesn't matter where you are at this moment. You are part of this conversation, and we're thrilled to have you here. Now, my name is Jacquini Bisselink. I'm a former United Nations youth representative, a future generations researcher and speaker. Also very Dutch, if you haven't heard so yet. But most of all, I'm really happy to be your moderator for this day and guide you through a really fun and engaging and insightful program that we have ahead of us. Now, a few notes. I think it's also good to have a moment of gratitude, because what we actually see is that this event, it has been made possible by a lot of different people. We had the moderated sessions this morning and yesterday by people in the community. We had the interactive stands outside. There's a photo exhibition. We have live performances. So this is really a celebration of collaborative effort. And I want to take a moment so you can give a warm round of applause for yourself and for each other. Yeah. That's worth a celebration, right? Now, two more practical notes. So this event is being broadcasted live, so also a big wave to everyone joining us online. And the last thing is, if you want to share anything online, photos, videos, reflections, reviews, you can do so, and you can use the hashtag EU Climate Pact. So hashtag EU Climate Pact. And you can also tag us DigiClima, and then we can repost and reshare everything. Now, today we're going to discuss a really important topic, which is the future of climate action. And we have a mandate lying ahead of us, and we're going to discuss, okay, how can we do that in a way that's just? How can we engage as much citizens as possible? And how can we prepare for those big challenges that we have laying ahead of us? Now, this is a big topic. We're going to discuss it with a lot of really well-equipped speakers, panels, performances. And we're going to start with a conversation with two remarkable voices within the climate space. And the first person that will be joining us is actually Wopke Hoekstra, the European Commissioner for Climate, for Net Zero and for Clean Growth. So his responsibility is to make sure that the EU actually delivers on its commitments when it comes to climate. And he will be discussing that with us together. So Commissioner, welcome. Right. Goed, dankjewel. And next to Commissioner Hoekstra, the conversation will be led by two really well-equipped climate ambassadors. First from Italy, we have Sara Segantin. I hope, yes, I got it. She's a strong promoter of climate literacy, and she has her own radio show, TV show. She's a writer, and she's one of the co-founders for Fridays for Future. So happy to have you here, Sara. And then, last but not least, we are honored to have with us Sasha Bezuhanova, and she's the founder of Move.bg, which is an initiative that focuses on sustainable innovation and entrepreneurship. So she has a wealth of experience. Happy to have you here, Sasha. Have a seat. Now, before I go and leave you in the capable hands of these climate ambassadors, I have one question for you. Because what we see is that the Climate Pact has been really busy trying to mobilize action and to engage as much communities as possible. So why do you think, given the challenges that we have today, that it is more important than ever before that we have these kinds of movements like the Climate Pact?
Thank you, and dear friends, very good to see you, and thank you very much for taking the time, for being here together, and for all the things you're doing, in many cases, next to your regular work. I truly appreciate that. It continues to be extremely important. And that is actually also the reason, by the way, I see many of you putting up your phones. I like that. I'll try to make it even juicier. You don't need to put them down. I saw a couple of people immediately putting their hands down. That's perfectly fine. I always presume we're on the record. But I think it is absolutely related to what you were just saying. The one thing we lack is time. And I said that many times before to people. Why are we so in a rush? Why is it so complicated? Well, basically because if we would have started this quest, like actually some scientists advised us decades earlier, the pace of the whole transition would have been different. We would have been able to allow ourselves more time. But if you look at the damage that we see, and you all know the examples, I'm sure we're going to talk about it later on, in Europe, but also very much so outside of Europe, that is already huge. And the damage, unfortunately, will only go up. I keep repeating, it will get worse before it gets better. So we are in a hurry.
Yeah. And I think that you also feel that sense of urgency. I already see that you have a lot of things that you want to discuss, so I'll let the conversation flow. So Sara, Sasha, Commissioner, over to you.
Thank you.
We not only sense this sense of urgency, but we all act quite actively on this. And we had, Commissioner, very, very lively and productive discussions, and I'm sure that this will come up to you in the coming days. But now is for us the moment to go from the grassroots to the political agenda. So in January, President von der Leyen announced a competitiveness compass with 3 pillars: decarbonization, innovation, and security. And it was further pragmatized with the 2 initiatives that was a bit more specific, Clean Industrial Deal and the Rearm Europe. And of course, while we all are understanding the necessity for priority investment in defense spendings in times like today, we of course want to understand more how Clean Industrial Deal will build on what we believe is the Europe's only competitiveness agenda in the world, meaning Climate Act agenda, and of course securing the priority investments in innovation that is topical and not only. So clearly this can be an industrial roadmap for us, but the reality is that once on 26th of February the Clean Industrial Deal was announced, we observed that quite few businesses deprioritize the decarbonization targets and investments. And we also see that many banks and as also private investors, players, are skeptical on putting money into green innovative scale-ups. So there is a need urgently to translate the priorities of Clean Industrial Deals and to give arguments to the businesses that they need to invest in circularity and decarbonization, to the risk investors that they need to support the green tech, to the employees that they need to be part of the in-house community, and I can continue. How we can really make the Clean Industrial Deal lively instruments, and also on the decarbonization bank, which is one of the elements today, because obviously this money would help us to meet the climate goals of Europe.
Thank you, and I think great direction you're taking us in. Let me start by saying, before I embark on the answer, in your question. Why is that? Well, actually, if you think about what the compass is, it is the direction of travel for the new Commission. And one of the 3 pillars is about decarbonization, full stop. That is one. That's one reason why I'm optimistic. Secondly, and I view that as a necessity, when we're talking about decarbonization, we normally talk about decarbonization as something we need to do for climate. Even though it is crystal clear that climate alone is about decarbonization, full stop. That is one. That's one reason why I'm optimistic. Secondly, and I view that as a necessity, when we're talking about decarbonization, we normally talk about decarbonization as something we need to do for climate. Even though it is crystal clear that climate alone is good enough of a reason. But it is also a reason to embark on more competitiveness, and it is also a reason to embark on more strategic independence for the European Union. Reasons that makes more of a package, more of a balanced story. And that is not just a narrative. It does make the sales easier politically because people are susceptible to different audiences or to different arguments. You are here because your heart is in the first place in the domain of climate. But there are people equally as passionate about us becoming less dependent on dubious regimes as well. And again, others will be arguing this why, not as a means, but as a means to make sure we have economies that actually can carry all the things that are dear to us: climate policy, security, housing, education, you name it. So in my view, that more holistic, that less one-dimensional focus on why we need to actually is an improvement rather than anything. And in my view, it will be easier to bring businesses, and that is important, right? Because in the end, we often talk about countries and their emissions. And true, a lot of the emissions come from citizens. But if you actually are going to look who some of the main emitters are in the world, you come up with a list, relatively limited list of companies. So making sure that they do their fair share and more than their fair share is extremely important. One last comment about optimization. It is mostly part of the portfolio of Jessica Roswell, who's doing an amazing job here. But it's also very much linked, of course, to climate. And I'm very, very passionate about it, and that is a reason why I cannot have you mention the word and not respond to it. And the reason is because it is actually exactly at this nexus. We have an opportunity to become the champion, the world champion, in circularity of the whole globe. Why is that important? Well, first and foremost, because it would matter a hell of a lot for climate. There is also a business case to be had, because it is good, if you do it in the right way, it is good for your purse as well, it is good for businesses, and it would help our independence. And that is good because I want to have less rather than more dependence on dubious regimes outside of the European Union. So let's make sure that that world of circularity arrives sooner rather than later. It is potentially huge, dear friends. It is huge. It has many, many upsides to it. And we're going to move from a world in which we were actually, deposing 90% of the stuff we were using into a world where we're actually going to recycle and reuse 90%. I think that's cool, and that's very good news.
And, about circularity and circular economy, I mean, we are all very happy. That's the core also of the Clean Industrial Deal. And also it's a good message because about the concept of circularity is not going all around in circle and then go back to the starting point, but having a zero waste and also to reduce consumption and reduce overproduction and so on. But I have a question about the premises. I mean, now it's a time of pragmatism, of being very real, very practical. And we cannot go on with these myths of endless growth and of overinvestments only in technology and innovation with neglecting nature-based solutions and these other solutions. And also the Circular Economy Act that's coming out in 2026. It's going to be an important message on this. How is it addressing these premises, this radical shift we need in our whole economic system that's able to put together circular economy, but also reducing consumption, zero waste, and on and on. So it's cultural and economic, huge shift.
Well, what that requires is that we also, as policymakers, with the help of citizens, actually reset some of the parameters. And let me just give you one example that always stuck with me and where I learned about it from business. I was having a conversation with the CEO of IKEA, and he gave me an example from the member states I know best, but I wasn't aware, frankly speaking, of that example. He was telling me that because of what the Dutch government had done, he had to recollect all used mattresses. And initially, he was thinking that, well, that was a very reasonable thing to do from a climate perspective, but potentially also a bit of a burden. My wording, not his, but that's at least the way it came across to me. But he saw the sense of it. And then he found out that actually them recollecting these mattresses also has a business case to it. So it has upside to it. And that is, I think, precisely the way we would like us to go. And that means that you need smart policy making, because of course mattresses are a different type of thing than batteries. And again, that is different than the whole complicated conversation we have about energy. And in some cases, it might not work like the example I just gave you. But I think as an analogy, as a way to think about this, a government trying to set a smart policy, a company, truly following up on this and finding a way that is good for climate and good for business, I think is the way to go.
Actually, to encourage you in the context of the Circular Act for next year to think about the business cases, the circular system is similar, and we should build it similarly to the e-government system, because you have many players on different levels, have business add-on, and you secure independency, you secure zero waste, and in Finland, maybe even here in the room, we can find the model how this can scale up to the whole Europe. But we don't dig into the topic of circularity only, because there are many, many other areas that we want to hear your opinion on. We, of course, understand the industrial dimension of the whole competitiveness that we can add on. But there is another very, very important component into this, which has to do with the protection of the natural assets that we have, and securing both adaptation and mitigation, because at the end of the day, in days like today, we should remind that this is also part of the security agenda of Europe and of everybody in the world. So here the point is how you believe with collective efforts we can secure the nature-based solutions that are really having a big effect on how we protect our natural resources. And I know this is not on your specific supervision, but we, of course, are following the Nature Restoration Act and its practical implementations that closely relates, of course, to the climate agenda, because climate and biodiversity goes hand to hand if we want to be serious about the outcome.
No, absolutely, and there are clearly there are two sides of the same coin, and let's be frank and honest about this. In this domain, we across the globe, and certainly in Europe, will need to do more. Not just for the sake of biodiversity, but also, and just listen to scientists. If you want nature to be a sink for carbon, it better be in good health. So that's the reality, and that is, by the way, exactly why Jessica Roswell is so much pushing for this. It's not always easy with member states and with others, but I think in general it is very much seen that this is needed. And by the way, here as well, the more we are able in the conversation about nature credits to make sure that those who some might perceive to be on the other end of the equation or of the conversation, we bring them in and we give them an incentive to do the right things rather than doing things that are at the detriment of nature, the easier it gets, right? I gave you the IKEA example. I'll give you one other example of circularity, and then I promise I'll shut up. But I think it paints the way in the same direction. them an incentive to do the right things rather than doing things that are at the detriment of nature, the easier it gets, right? I gave you the IKEA example. I'll give you one other example of circularity, and then I promise I'll shut up. But I think it paints the way in the same direction. I might have given this example to some of you before. I was at some point in time I was buying a new pair of jeans, and then the woman behind the counter asked me, "Okay, so can I have your old jeans?" And I said, "Well, that's an interesting question. Why?" And she then explained to me their recycling system. What was the consumer getting back in that shop? I think 10 or 20 euros for every pair of jeans that you would be handing in. I mean, is that a game changer for every shopper? Probably not. But then again, what is it, 10% or 15% or 20% discount on that type of a jeans is probably actually something that incentivizes a consumer to adopt behavior. And next time, bring more jeans. Is something similar possible in the domain of nature and nature credits? Absolutely. Let's make sure that those people working in and with nature, and typically well-spirited, that we bring the way forward for them, the business case for them, incentivizing to do the right thing. I think if that is something we manage to pull off, that is going to be truly a game changer.
Yeah, we need to act multi-level. And about that, Commissioner, I really appreciate your optimism, because we really need it in these hard times. But I think it's also crystal clear that we are facing a severe geopolitical crisis. Winds of war are shaking even Europe, the genocide in Palestine just starting back again. We have millions of people who are obliged to leave their lands because of wars, of climate crisis. Still, in Europe, we don't have a recognition for climate refugees. It's even harder and harder to recognize political refugees. And we know that wars fuel climate change, while climate change fuels wars, and we need a climate justice approach to face this multi-crisis present, and to recognize this link in between human rights and climate crisis. And Europe has always positioned itself as a champion, as a leader in climate justice. But now times have changed, things are getting harder and harder, and also with the shift in the funding policies of Europe, we're going to have less and less money for climate, for social justice, for loss and damage, and all these related issues. So I think we really need to set our priorities very clearly. And I think climate justice is the priority. My question is, given this present situation, being very practical, very realistic, as you have always been, which strategies is the European Union putting in place to be and to maintain its role as a champion, as a leader in climate justice here and all over the world?
So, you're earning the first applause of the afternoon. It's the difficulty and the beauty of policy making, whether you do that in one of the EU institutions or in a national government or wherever, is that unfortunately you never have the luxury of just one very important priority. It simply doesn't exist. Money is always scarce, problems are always too many, and in this case, I mean, let's be real. None of us doubts the absolutely devastating impact that climate is having on Europe, on the world, for years and years and years to come. So clearly that should be extremely high on our agenda. Secondly, I think there are very few people in this audience doubt, and at least I would be an advocate that we should never doubt, the tremendous importance of rapidly building up a defense industry to make sure we're not being lured into a fake peace or appeasement or making any of the mistakes we made at huge, huge, huge human cost throughout the 20th century. It is absolutely pivotal. It is absolutely pivotal that we signal to dictators around the globe, first and foremost the one in the Kremlin, that you cannot sit us out. And that means helping our Ukrainian friends. That means helping building up a defense industry and working on security is also very, very high on that priority list. So that's two. 3, it's of a different nature, but I am going to add it because it is quite often simply not understood. Make no mistake about AI. It has huge potential for humanity. But the reality is also it is not very well understood. It will come with huge disruption, and it will completely change the world in which we live. And many of you here are younger than at least I am, so you might be more versatile and you might be more adaptive to change. But for all generations, this will change the world in the decades to come. It's different in terms of its nature. It has more opportunity to it than only a threat. But all these 3 themes are extremely important, will have huge effects on life in Europe. And I would not want to say I'm going to leave out one at the expense of the other. And then, by the way, there's still a much longer list of priorities related to healthcare, related to education, related to fairness, related to international justice that I can not just discard. So what we need to do is indeed have that conversation about what the priorities are. My priority list starts with those 3. But what we will need, and then I'm going to broaden the list again, if you want to pay for this. If you want to pay for this as a European Union, you will have to face the reality that we are a continent with mediocre economic growth, overburdened by debt, and relatively low on reforms. And if we're not going to change that, the only conversation we're going to have is the one, and I don't mean that to harass you, but the only conversation we're going to have is how can we divide the cake, and is climate more important or less important than geopolitics, and is it 50-50, 60-40 or 40-60? What we will need to do is to expand the cake, make sure that there is more, and I know this is sensitive for some of you, sustainable, I say it again, sustainable economic growth in the European Union, that we fairly distribute, and that then actually tackles all these main problems. That is the name of the game. Extremely complex, but very much necessary if you have multiple crises at the same time, as unfortunately we do have. There's at least one fan somewhere in the audience.
Just one suggestion in that line. Maybe on your level you can really promote the idea that we as Europeans support Ukraine not only with weapons and in their defense agenda, helping ourselves also, but to include the climate effects also as an element into this, because already exists quite a holistic program, Building Back Better, that never makes it into the political conferences because obviously defense topic becomes very critical. So maybe in your role you can really expand what we do for Ukraine, and not only, but this is at the moment a topic.
But it is what we're doing. Eh? So my conversations with Svetlana, and I was in Ukraine only 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, time flies, is exactly about this. And how do you with all the damage that the Russian war machine has done, how do we help them not only to first and foremost make sure they are strong on the battlefield and strong on the negotiation table, but that we also help them to plan for a sustainable future at the other side of that. And make no mistake, we might be intimidated by our to-do list. Just think about how they think about their to-do list. With the war still going on, and then what they will need to do in terms of rebuilding their society. The psychological and sociological effect, what it does to you as a society with so many people who have been literally losing their limbs. Women, men and children being raped by Russian soldiers. Villages that simply don't exist anymore, and on and on and on. And on top of that, you also need to rebuild an energy system that is actually greener than the one you used to be having before. Now, what I admire in the Ukrainians, what I deeply admire in them, is not only their capability to, against incredible odds, continue to fight, but actually that in this phase, and that's really something I applaud them for. They have been, for the last 3 years, thinking about what is life going to be at the other side of the war. So they're talking with us, and I did this when I was a foreign minister, but also as a climate commissioner, about how to green the energy system, how to live up to the elements of the Green Deal in our trajectory towards the European Union, how to make sure that we eradicate corruption, how to make sure we expose ourselves to more innovation. It's a pretty big task, right? You're fighting a war and you're already thinking about these type of priorities. So I think that is really, really commendable.
There is quite a work done specifically in the area of climate action and green rebuild. So I'll be happy to share this with your team so that you have in mind this into your agenda.
And I think we are all concerned about the safety of Europe. That's the independence of our countries. Still, it comes to my mind also the example of Costa Rica. That's a completely different place, clearly, but the only country in the world with no army, and it has been defined by multiple reports as one of the safest countries in the world, and also one of the safest countries about climate crisis and climate crisis resilience. So what worries me when we talk about now, about the present, is that with no land, with no water, no food, and no people, there is nothing left to defend or to invest in. And what's happening, and this is also my next question, this is what's happening in many places of the world, small island developing countries, but also many African and Asian and South American countries are already disappearing from the world itself. And the European Union has always played a pivotal role, also in climate change world conferences, in loss and damage agendas, okay? And with COP30 approaching, what are going to be the measures and the policies and also the funding initiatives that the European Union is going to promote, and what are we going to do as Europe, and what are we going to ask also to other countries about, it's always climate justice agenda, but in this case, adaptation and green transition in the so-called developing countries?
We should spend the vast majority of the conversation on climate. So I'm going to answer this to you because I think it is pivotally important that we take the whole world along. But I cannot resist just commenting on one thing you said about Costa Rica, them not having an army, and isn't that great? I would wish that for the whole world.
Yeah.
What does the history of Europe show? Weakness is provocative, and you will find yourself at the bad end of the equation, whether the dictator is named Stalin, Hitler, Putin, or whatever. So please, 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 and I'm saying that also to the next generation here in the audience, don't make the mistake that we have the luxury to basically see that as a thing of the past. It's simply not the case. Now on climate. The one thing we need to do, and where we as Europeans, I think, have an incredible asset, and I try to invest as much in that as possible at the COPs and throughout all our diplomatic efforts, is to build bridges with those who all belong to the coalition of the ambitious. That is the one thing I try to articulate whenever I'm in an international audience. We're from different places. If you look at the small island development states in whether it is the Pacific or the Caribbean, we might have different economic trajectories than, for example, our LDC friends in Africa. We might have different manifestations of climate change than some of our friends in Latin America and Asia. But regardless of our differences, there is a very substantial group of far more than 100, 120, 150 countries around the world who do take this very seriously and who do want us to do way more. And where, again, you might not be on equal footing on everything, but there is a huge understanding that we need to do more on mitigation, we need to do more on adaptation, and if fairness is to be part of this equation, you cannot ask from the European Union to solve this for the whole wide world, but it is fair to ask from those with deeper pockets to also help those more in need. And that is precisely what actually brought the diplomatic success of COP28. Under very difficult circumstances, because make no mistake, Didn't get easier since then, but that was also a time of war and huge geopolitical tensions. COP28 in Dubai was an unexpected success of diplomacy. And the reason was that we managed to not just be on our own as Europeans, but that we managed to kiss this grand coalition alive of the most ambitious, with the small island development states, with our friends in Africa, with, of course, the Europeans, but also with our friends from Canada, at that time from the US, from the Pacific, Australia and others, and New Zealand and others. So that is the name of the game. Extremely difficult, because we're living in a world that needs consensus in the domain of climate, and everyone has an opportunity to be a spoiler, unfortunately. But still very much necessary, because this is truly a global problem.
I agree with you, Commissioner. We really need consensus. We need to build alliances and to be able to talk to all the stakeholders also in a very credible and pragmatic way, as you actually used to do. And also this shift in communication, I think, is very important. As a journalist, I see it. We're not like 5 or even 2 years ago. So we need to build a solid narrative and to have a shift on that. But also, I have a feeling sometimes that these compromises or communication strategies, as we want to call it, in communication, risks to lead also in downscaled compromises in climate action, because the way in which we talk about the world, it also shapes reality, not only describing it. And so, and I think we need you, all the people working here, to adjust the sails in this storm. Clearly, obviously, is necessary, but also to steer the ship towards the final destination without changing it. And in your opinion, what is the way in which bringing and being the protagonist of this changing narrative without undermining the effectiveness of the climate action?
It's a very good question, and it is one of the most complicated things in my job. First, climate change is a problem that doesn't discriminate. And you could say, well, that is good for fairness. Well, actually it isn't, because it is not something that you can just clean up with the most ambitious, and then at least you have gotten rid of the problem for your own constituents. No, it is literally the case that it doesn't matter where the molecules are being pumped into the air, and then the whole world is at the receiving end of that problem. That is also the reason why it is extremely painful, but still very much necessary, that also those way less willing than us are somehow being brought on board. How do you then do that in the most effective way? Well, it is a combination of sticks and carrots. It is sometimes calling people out. It is sometimes closed-door diplomacy. And there is no recipe. There's not a perfect scientific approach that I can follow, and then I know exactly that I can bring country A to position B. And sometimes we fail. UAE was a large success, but we also know what happened thereafter. It didn't take more than, I think, 6 to 8 weeks, and then the first oil state was already saying, well, actually, we signed up, but this is an intention, and actually not more than that. Well, if that was only an intention, you probably didn't have to fight it that hard, but that's part of the reality. It is a game of consensus, and that makes it way slower. That makes it typically less ambitious than I would like to have, because I'm ambitious and I'm in a hurry.
Speaking about fastening this process, I believe here within this room, and quite few people are following us online, you have an army of co-pilots that are doing amazing actions on the ground for expanding the basis of citizen knowledge about the climate, but also citizens' engagements and even journalism. I've attended today a session about this. We have young people that are investing in authentically green businesses, and they need to be supported and accompanied. And I'm personally, after these 2 days, very much encouraged from what I have seen, amazing level of expertise and commitment. So here the question is how you personally see the future of the Climate Pact initiative, because I believe that if we speak about coalitions that can make a difference, here we have the champions of the coalitions that are driving difference in Europe, but not only.
Thank you. And again, it is a big thanks to you for all the work you are doing. And what I would hope and what I would plea for is that all of you have the capacity and the stamina to carry on and to continue with the great work and to, broaden the audience, to positively influence others, to either take a role like yourself or a role that is similar but that fits a specific person's situation. This is truly something that I cannot alone, that not a single policymaker can alone, where we need a lot of friends, supporters and allies. Maybe not as co-pilots. I think the average pilot will tell you that one co-pilot is great, two is even better, but many co-pilots will crash the plane. But regardless of the analogy, I think it is great to have such a huge group of supporters. The one thing I would ask from you, next to that I would love it if you would have the stamina to continue. And please, please, please find that and do continue. What we will see, and what we have seen in the last months and years, is many people in different ways questioning whether we can actually park this problem for a while. And sometimes that is completely fueled by disinformation. In some cases it might be genuine worries about, on the one hand, what climate change does, but also what climate change measurements might do to people's jobs or lives. Sometimes it might be worries about fairness or industry. What I would suggest to you, and that's not always easy, is to take in the arguments of, genuinely concerned people and see how you can work with them, see how we can actually broaden the group of people that are convinced that we need to do more. It doesn't bring much to, and that's also something I've learned the hard way in politics. It doesn't bring much to, to exclude yourself of a conversation that is difficult and where you are absolutely convinced that someone else is wrong. In the end, we're in a democracy and we need, again, maybe not co-pilots, but we need a grand coalition to make this work. So let's then build that coalition. And having the content on our side is only the beginning, but not the end of the conversation. In a democracy, you need to have the direction of travel. You need to know what it is where you want to go, but you also need to build a constituency that is large enough to support that. And if I were to articulate where most of our work should be going to, it is not on again, developing even better content. Yes, we will find new innovations. Yes, we will find new technologies, and scientists and business people will help us a lot. But it's much more on the second leg. It is much more on, hey, that is interesting. This is an argument I'm getting. How can I actually have a meaningful conversation to build a broader coalition rather than to exclude people who might not yet fully agree with me?
Thank you, Commissioner. And also thank you very much for this exchange that we really hope is going to continue. It's very productive to exchange perspectives, to see what's going on in the European, at the heart of the European Union, and also to see how many different ideas can really build reality. So thank you very much for your time and your responsibility.
Thank you. And thank you. Apparently time flies, but thank you. Thanks to the two of you for the great work you are doing. And dear friends, thanks again for the amazing work you are doing. It truly, truly, truly matters. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Don't leave us yet, because I think this is a perfect moment. We're here with a lot of people from the community, so what better way to